Indian Lake. It's 8 o'clock. This is Northern Light for Wednesday, May 17th. I'm Todd Moe. Governor Kathy Hochul's favorability ratings are below 50% for the first time, according to a new Siena College poll.
New Yorkers are not thrilled with Governor Hochul. We see over the last few months her job approval and favorability ratings starting to drop.
Also, Greg Olson with the State Office for the Aging says the North Country's aging population faces issues like affordable housing, transportation, and social isolation.
I don't think we put enough emphasis on purpose and attitude. When you look at people that are living past 100 years old, the main thing that researchers are finding is a positive outlook on life.
Officials in Canton are proposing to spend $25 million to rebuild the Town and Village Municipal Building. And Colton guitarist Paul Myers explains his love for Brazilian jazz. He and his trio whirled on a string of a concert at the Edwards Opera House Saturday night. It's all coming up on Northern Light. Stay tuned. Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Mountain Orthotic and Prosthetic Services, a full-service practice committed to providing care for patients of all ages, with offices in Lake Placid, Plattsburgh, and Malone. Details and referrals at mountainonp.com. And by Blue Seed Studios, a multidisciplinary art center featuring classes for adults and youth, concerts, art exhibits, and more. BLUseedstudios.org. This is Northern Light. I'm Todd Moe. Monica Sandreski has the day off. Earlier this month, the U.S. Surgeon General released an advisory on the impacts of isolation and loneliness on the American people. Greg Olson with the New York State Office for the Aging says it affects all age groups. Social
isolation increases the risk of premature death. It increases your risk of dementia. It increases your risk of depression, anxiety, and suicide. It's the equivalent of smoking almost a pack of cigarettes a day.
Olson says his agency has launched many initiatives aimed at addressing the issue. Those include a robotic pet project, subsidizing online classes for older adults, and a pilot rideshare program currently running in 3 counties. But Olson told our Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman that some things that help with social isolation don't cost anything at all.
Let's start with the music. I mean, I became very interested.
Checking in on a neighbor. If you have an older adult in your life, make a phone call, stop and visit once in a while. You know, the senior centers are back open now, so people can actually get out to places where they can interact with others. Because we know when you are not isolated and you're interacting, your brain function increases, your physical strength increases, your purpose in life increases, and your overall attitude increases. And, you know, I don't think we put enough emphasis on purpose and attitude. When you look at people that are living past 100 years old, the main thing that researchers are finding is a positive outlook on life versus somebody who might have a negative outlook on life and what the impact of that is.
You know, your agency and its network covers the entire state, but what are the main challenges with regard to aging that you hear about in rural areas like the North Country?
Actually, the challenges are very similar, surprisingly. Affordable enabling housing, transportation, getting community services that help support older adults to stay independent and out of hospitals, emergency departments, and nursing homes. So I think that the overwhelming challenge for aging is that most older adults, if not all of them, prefer to stay in their home and communities. It's much cheaper to do that. They will succeed and have better health care and quality of life outcomes. But we have a health and long-term care system that's very reactive. So we spend a lot of money on the back end, and we don't put the prevention and community-based services into the community to prevent those high-cost settings.
I did want to touch on last fall when Governor Kathy Hochul signed an executive order to create the state's master plan on aging. Can you talk about, why is that needed?
We started this work in 2005, trying to create livable communities for people of all ages. That morphed into becoming the first age-friendly state in 2018. The master plan for aging is really age-friendly 2.0 on steroids. What it does is allows us to really connect the dots at the state level, work with county governments and other public and private organizations at the community level and the population itself, because 60% of all healthcare costs have nothing to do with a healthcare diagnosis. 10% is a diagnosis, 30% is genetic, 60% is your environment. What are my personal things that I do? Do I smoke? Do I eat well? Do I exercise? What does my built environment look like? My water quality, my air quality, lead paint, living in a rural area. So that's kind of the premise of all this.
Where are things at with that process?
We have over 20 state agencies on a state agency committee. Then we have a stakeholder committee. We've developed a variety of subcommittees that are dealing with particular issues. So whether that be caregiving, the workforce, economic security, et cetera, those are all working literally as we speak. End of summer, midsummer, we're going to be doing community forums to go out to the public and see what they think. What are the types of things or challenges that they have? How are their communities designed? We just finished our first ever statewide needs assessment survey. We had 27,000 responses from every county in New York State. And then we'll put together a plan, which will then be a living, breathing document that can continue to be amended, adjusted as things change. And hopefully at that point, we'll be able to kind of reorganize our care system so that we can reward the community infrastructure so that you can save money on the health and long-term care infrastructure.
What else do you want, older New Yorkers and North Country residents to know about the resources available to them through the Office for the Aging and its, partners across the state?
Every single county in New York State has a county Office for the Aging. If there's something that you need directly or a loved one does, start with the Office for the Aging, and you can connect to them by calling 1-800-342-9871. And then I would encourage people, get out and volunteer, join civic groups, et cetera. That's the best thing you can do for yourself, is to stay socially engaged. There's so many additional benefits to whether it be volunteering or, mentoring or whatever it might be that somebody has an interest on. And then some of the free resources we have for people can go to our website. It's aging.ny.gov, and you can connect for free to our Get Set Up app. If you're caring for somebody, regardless of their age, we have a free evidence-based caregiver support application called TruAlta. And we have more as well, but you can check those things out. Those are free to anybody in New York State. That's what I would leave your listeners with.
Greg Olson with the State Office for the Aging. He spoke with our Champlain Valley reporter, Kara Chapman. This week, public media stations are collaborating with his agency to address social isolation among older adults. Olson took part in a pre-taped panel discussion that will air this Friday on Mountain Lake PBS. The last major hospital system in the North Country to require masks is ending its mandate. St. Lawrence Health, with hospitals in Potsdam, Messina, and Gouverneur, and clinics across St. Lawrence County, called the change a major milestone with the reduced presence of COVID-19 in the area. Hospitals in Watertown, Plattsburgh, Saranac Lake, Alexandria Bay, Glens Falls, and Malone had all switched to a mask-optional policy in most facilities. St. Lawrence Health says required masking may continue in certain high-risk areas, including areas serving immunocompromised patients. The federal government officially ended the emergency declaration due to the COVID-19 pandemic last week. A Siena College poll out this week shows Governor Kathy Hochul's popularity with New Yorkers is on a steady downward trend, and for the first time, more voters view her unfavorably than those who view her positively. From Albany, Karen DeWitt has more.
Siena College pollster Steve Greenberg says since January, Hochul's favorability rating among potential voters has dropped by 11 points. He says the governor is now underwater, with 45% of those surveyed viewing her unfavorably and just 40% viewing her favorably. Her job approval rating has also dropped by a few points, and now just 50% of New Yorkers think she is doing a good or excellent job in office.
New Yorkers are not thrilled with Governor Hochul. We see over the last few months her job approval and favorability ratings starting to drop.
Hochul, a Democrat, scores poorly with Republicans, but less than one-third of independent voters, an often important swing faction in elections, view her favorably. And just 57% of Democrats have a positive view of her. Hochul, who became governor in August of 2021 after Andrew Cuomo resigned, has never seen her favorable numbers rise above 50%. On the positive side, most say they believe the governor is hardworking, and a plurality of voters say she is honest and not corrupt. Greenberg says there's no easy explanation for Hochul's disconnect with voters. Some of the same people who view her unfavorably also say they agree with many of the policies enacted in the recently approved state budget and that Hochul championed.
$1 billion for mental health services, increasing the minimum wage, reform of the bail law to give judges more discretion, $100 million for abortion providers and reproductive health. All of those issues, the voters of New York State say these bills, these laws will be good for New York.
Hochul is governing at a time when most politicians of both parties are unpopular. Even so, the poll found that President Joe Biden's popularity has increased during the same time period. He's now viewed favorably by 56% of the state's Democrats, up from 43% earlier this year. 60% of Republicans in the state favor former President Donald Trump for the 2024 elections, while nearly a third say they would prefer someone else. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
Get more news all the time on our website at ncpr.org. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It is coming up on 13 minutes past 8. Good morning, I'm Todd Moe. Monica has the day off. This is music by Colton guitarist Paul Myers. And stay tuned. We've got more music and conversation with him coming up in just a few minutes. Paul and his trio World on a String will give a concert Saturday night in Edwards. And we'll tell you more coming up in just a few minutes. Broadcast of Northern Light is supported by St. Lawrence Nurseries in Potsdam, providing the North Country with cold, hardy fruit and nut trees for nearly 100 years. slngrow.com. And by Fort de la Presentation, home of the Abbey Piquet Walking Trail, open 7 days a week from sunrise to sunset. Fort1749.org. Messina Central School District had a large police presence yesterday after a threatening social media message was posted Sunday night. According to the Watertown Daily Times, the message was received through students on Snapchat. It was vague and didn't state a specific type of threat, school, or district. Messina police are investigating the message. School Superintendent Patrick Brady told the newspaper it was similar to other swatting messages schools in the region have recently seen. The act of swatting involves contacting emergency services to report false threats with the goal of drawing a heavy police presence. Officials in Canton are proposing to rebuild the Town and Village Municipal Building, but the planned $25 million project is still in the early stages. NCPR intern Maya Mackey has more.
Canton's municipal building sits on Main Street in the heart of the historic downtown. It was built in the 1960s. Michael Dalton, the mayor of Canton, says the building is unsafe and inaccessible.
Well, there's problems with our plumbing and heating. Air conditioning. There's water coming across the floor in the basement. We have issues with handicapped accessibility. You cannot get up into the police station right now if you're handicapped or disabled in any way.
Officials hired architects from Watertown and asked employees what they wanted in the new building before announcing the proposal to the town and village boards. The new building will have more room for the Canton Police Department, storage for historical items, and a larger and more accessible parking lot. Dalton is working with Canton Town Supervisor Marianne Ashley on the proposal. Ashley explained that they bought the McDonald's property next door, and they plan to start construction there.
We just closed on the McDonald's property, and the idea is to build on that space along with the parking lot, and then transfer, and then demolish this building. So we've outlived our space.
Dalton and Ashley agree that their primary concern is for the health and safety of everyone who uses the Canton Municipal Building.
Well, this is two hubs of government, the town and village. The employees that work here, 30 people, they deserve better working environments.
The town board and members of the village will need to approve the proposal, and they need to start fundraising. But right now, that's a long way off. Maya Mackey, North Country Public Radio.
The state Senate yesterday passed a constitutional amendment that would facilitate the sale of a former Franklin County prison. Camp Gabriel's in the town of Brighton was closed in 2009. It's located on state forest preserve land in the Adirondack Park. That means development there requires the passage of a constitutional amendment. The amendment would need to pass the Assembly, then pass both houses of the state legislature again after the next general election in order to keep moving forward. If that happens, it would go to the state's voters for approval. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe. Coming up in just a moment, music and conversation with guitarist Paul Myers. Also, we will check our community calendar, some of the events happening. And then at 8:30, it's back to more of Morning Edition. The Weather Service says cool sunshine for much of the region today with highs in the upper 40s into the mid-50s, winds out of the northwest 10 to 15 miles per hour, and maybe some frost in our region again tonight and early Thursday morning. Lows overnight in the upper 20s, near 30, under clear skies, and then tomorrow highs in the low 60s with sunshine. Friday, more seasonal weather with sunshine, highs in the 70s Friday afternoon, and then a chance of showers Saturday and Sunday with highs in the upper 60s and low 70s. Right now in Canton, mostly cloudy skies and 36 degrees. Guitarist Paul Myers, who began his musical career in the North Country, is back on the road for a second season of concerts since the COVID-19 pandemic. His first stop with his World on a String trio is the Edwards Opera House this Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Myers spent his teen years in Potsdam, where he fell in love with playing guitar and jazz music. He's spent years teaching, performing, recording in the New York City area to much acclaim. A couple of years ago, he moved back to the North Country, where he continues to make music along with his World on a String trio. And I caught up with him recently to ask him about how he learned to love Brazilian jazz.
Let's start with the music. I mean, I became very interested in jazz in my late teens. I was already playing guitar, and I was living here in Potsdam. We moved up to Potsdam. My mother taught at Crane. I was 12 years old, and that's just when I started playing guitar, and I started playing with my friends in bands in junior high school and high school like that, rock bands and blues. And then I got interested in jazz, very interested in jazz, and that's kind of the path I took. Along the way, I got interested in Brazilian music, and actually the first connection with that, my mother had in her collection of records 2 records by Baden Powell, who was a fantastic Brazilian guitarist. I started listening to those, and I thought, well, this is, it's not jazz and it's not classical guitar. It's something, but it's beautiful. It's really interesting. And that was my first connection to the music, along with some of the standards that the great composer Antonio Carlos Jobim had written that had already become part of the standard jazz repertoire. And then I started meeting people. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. This is back in the 80s. And meeting first Americans that were more involved in the Brazilian music scene in New York City, and started playing with them and learning more of that repertoire. And then Brazilian musicians, great Brazilian musicians that were living in the city, and started playing with them. And it just it's very easy for a guitar player to get hooked on Brazilian music because there's so much good guitar in Brazil. It's almost like, every other Brazilian plays pretty good guitar, and a lot of them play great. So, I kind of got hooked. And it is still, in a way, it's like jazz because there's a lot of improvisation. It is jazz. It's just the rhythms are different, and the style is different. But there's the improvisational part is something that I was already doing and involved in, and it just kind of expanded my horizons and gave me a whole new deep well of music to explore and learn about and try to learn how to play. So that's how it started. And at a certain point, I was always writing some music myself. And some of the music started to become more influenced by Brazilian rhythms and those styles.
Is the Brazilian rhythm, the Brazilian jazz, is it something that you find yourself connected to or attracted to because of that? I don't know. It's not just listenable, but it almost makes you want to move. It makes you want to dance, right?
Jazz is like that too, in its own way. I mean, all these musics were dance music. Jazz was dance music in the swing era, and so that, and I love that rhythm. And part of it is the fun of exploring different rhythms. For instance, if you think of playing one tune, one thing that happens with jazz players, for instance, is they'll play a standard tune, an American tune, as a jazz tune, but then they'll also play it as a bossa nova. And just changing the rhythm changes the feeling and the mood of the tune. That's a common one, but as I got into Brazilian music, I discovered it's very rich in different rhythmic styles. So bossa nova is a style, actually. It's more like kind of a mellowed out samba style is really what it is. And samba, of course, is probably the best known and the most popular rhythm from Brazil, and it's great. But then there are others. There's baião, and there's maracatu, and there's frevo, and there's calongo is another one that I like. It's very rich, and each one has its own little dance feeling to it. It's a little different from the others. So it's a joy in that way to connect with the rhythm first of all of any of the styles, and each one kind of, I don't know. It's like if I imagine myself playing the same tune in each one of those different rhythms, I'd play it a little differently in each one, because of the feeling. So yeah, that is you're right on point with that.
The Edwards Opera House Summer Concert Series continues with Paul Myers and World on a String Trio this Saturday night, May 20th, 7 o'clock. Tickets and more info available at edwardsoperahouse.com. You can get tickets for the live and live stream show. You can get them at the door, and you can also get them on the website, edwardsoperahouse.com. Check it out. Paul Myers and World on a String. The concert is Saturday night, 7 o'clock at the Edwards Opera House. It's 8:26. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe. Monica has this week off. Thanks for joining us. There's a few community calendar events to pass along to you. The Barn Quilt Show at the Frederick Remington Art Museum continues. It's on view in the museum's Hershey Gallery through Sunday the 21st, featuring over 40 locally made barn quilts. Lots of great color and designs. Check those out at the Remington Art Museum in Ogdensburg. The hours are 11 to 5. Also, coming up, a chance to learn a little bit about blacksmithing at the Adirondack Adirondack Folk School. Steve Gersler has an open forge night from 6:30 to 8. You can be introduced to the art of blacksmithing during the open forge night. An amazing demonstration by an expert blacksmith. It's free, open to the public. There is a small fee to try your hand at blacksmithing, but check it out at the Adirondack Folk School in Lake Luzerne. There's more information at adirondackfolkschool.org. You can check out the list of their summer programming as well. That's at adirondackfolkschool.org. Check that out. Lots of events happening around our region. Visit our website for more information. That's at ncpr.org/calendar. And I can't let the show go by without reminding you that today is May 17th. This is Norway's Constitution Day. 17. Mai. Hurrah for 17. Mai. A little music here by the group Blåman Blåman. This is Trollhulling. That's Northern Lights for this Wednesday, May 17th. Satnamai. I'm Todd Mullis. Stick around for news from NPR and more of Morning Edition coming up. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Be well.